Thanks for attending the Blockchain Meetup Conference 2024. My name is Dr. Anthony Ayodele. I am the program manager and a subject matter expert in cybersecurity within the Technology Center Division, Office of Science and Engineering, Department of Homeland Security. Today, I will be talking about the current status and future outlook of central bank digital currency initiative in the United States. Specifically, I will be reviewing a project that is currently ongoing that we have collaboration with Republic of Korea. The project is Central Bank Digital Currency and Effect on Law Enforcement. As a background, in January 2022, the Federal Reserve issues discussion paper on central bank digital currency. Specifically, they discuss money and payment relating to the US dollar in the age of digital transformations. The key focus is on whether and how a central bank digital currency could improve an already safe and efficient US domestic payment system. The Federal Reserve initial analysis suggests that a potential US CBDC, if one were to be created, would best serve the need of the United States by being privacy protected, intermediated, widely transferable, and identity verified. Other areas that the paper discussed include financial inclusions, transaction rates, energy use, and effect on climate. Also, it talked about interest bearing and limit on holdings, and reserves and flight to safety. Subsequent to this paper, in September of 2022, the White House Office of Science and Technology produced a technical evaluation of central bank digital currency. This technical evaluation reviewed 18 design options. And those options are what we are going to be looking at as part of this project. Additionally, in April of 2023, the US and the Republic of Korea agreed to have a strategic cybersecurity cooperative framework. This framework emphasized the need for US and the Korean team to cooperate and develop a response technology to detect, track malicious activities in cyberspace to include money laundering and cryptocurrency theft. Therefore, through the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Science and Technology International Cooperative Program Office, the research I'm going to talk about today has been jointly agreed to between the US and the Republic of Korea. So, what is this research about? The whole idea of the research is to potentially look at the effect of a central bank issued digital currency in the United States. How will a CBDC affect law enforcement ability to identify illicit transactions and identify the individual responsible? So, in September of 2023, we kick off this project in partnership with a US-based performer. So as part of this joint research activities, my team has been working closely with the Republic of Korea team on how we can jointly work together to execute this joint research effort as a collaborative work. This work will involve knowledge sharing between the US and the Republic of Korea, specific to central bank, digital currency, and the effect on law enforcement. The scope of this project include: 1, we need to review the CBDC's design sources, looking at various literature on US CBDC to potentially identify probable design choices with relevant to law enforcement. This project will also explore the impact of CBDC design choices on law enforcement based on various methods through interviews, literature review, to examine how CBDC might impact existing law enforcement techniques and procedures. As part of this project, a workshop is going to be put in place to identify possible new law enforcement techniques, identify if there is a need for revision to existing law enforcement techniques, policies, and resources. As part of this project, we are going to look at how we can establish or gather requirements and technical gap for determining entity attributions, tracking, and monitoring of central bank digital currency transactions. Finally, this research may generate the development of a technology or various technologies that can help us to determine entity attributions, help us to track and monitor central bank digital currency transactions. So far, so good. As I mentioned before, the White House Office of Science and Technology identified 18 technical design choices for a US central bank digital currency. So my team have crosswalked and looked at all these 18 design options and tried to isolate the options that may have potential impact on law enforcement. Therefore, we have identified 4 relevant design choices that we believe may have relevance to law enforcement. Number 1, transaction traceability. How can we trace the use of a central bank issued digital currency? 2, how can we identify the entity? How can we attribute an entity to the transactions? 4, how can we potentially prevent and immediately correct any fraudulent transaction carried out through the use of central bank digital currency? Finally, how can we suspend immediately, freeze as soon as possible, or potentially seize this fraudulent asset? Therefore, we have isolated 8 design choices that are mostly relevant to law enforcement. As part of the crosswalk we have looking at these 4 areas. Again, the 4 areas that we have looked at that are very important are traceability, entity attributions, preventions and correcting fraudulent transactions, and suspending and freezing and seizing assets. Based on the initial screening that we have done, the 8 design choices that we believe are relevant to law enforcement are as follows. Number 1, intermediations. What are the roles and identity of a third party in facilitating transactions? Number 2, we need to be able to identify privacy, identity privacy. To which extent are these individuals involved in CBCD can keep identity-related information confidential. Number 3, cryptography. What are the cryptography techniques used to secure information needed to operate a CBDC systems? Number 4, how can we keep the ledger history? If and how a CBDC issuance and transaction history are maintained? How are we going to be maintaining the transactions? How do we ensure there is an history that can be linked together as this transaction take place? Next is the transaction programmability. The question is whether third party can potentially carry out code 7 executing rules into the CBDC system itself. This is an area that we believe is very important. Next is transaction privacy. What are the concerns or issues that we may have with entity that carry out this transaction informations? Specifically, concern which entities can actually access these transactions informations. Can adversary or an attacker have access to these transactions informations? Moving forward, we also look at the offline capabilities. Can a CBDC system operate outside of a CBDC system being online? In essence, to which extent can a transaction still occur without connection to a online CBDC systems? Lastly, when we look at these 8 design sources, the last area that we are looking at that may be relevant to law enforcement is secure hardware. What are the roles a secure hardware will play? How do we understand what kind of hardware requirement we have to put in place to help us to secure data and computation within the CBDC systems? Looking at all of this, we believe that a good understanding of all these areas in terms of design choices will help us to better be prepared from a law enforcement perspective on how we can potentially manage a CBDC systems when it becomes one in the United States. So my team, we have been working to ensure these areas relating to law enforcement become more explored in the sense that we look deeper into all these areas. As I was saying before, looking at an existing financial asset that currently exists today, be it cash, retail deposit backed money, such as Venom, cryptocurrencies, stable coins, and non-fungible tokens. There are 4 areas that we have identified that are very important that law enforcement are currently using today relating to an existing asset. Number 1, traceability. Number 2, entity resolutions. Number 3, detecting fraudulent transactions. Number 4, freezing and ceasing asset. Looking at these 4 existing areas that are being used by law enforcement to manage existing assets today, we believe these 4 areas can potentially help us or offer us a lesson on how we can manage a central bank issued digital currency from these 4 perspectives. Can a CBDC be traceable? Can we attribute entities that are using this CBDC? Can we detect in a real-time fraudulent transactions? And can we, in a real time, freeze, seize any fraudulent asset that may have been conducted or carried out using a CBDC currency? Therefore, part of what we have done as part of the project is to set up what we call a scenario-based workshop. This workshop was held in April, and the workshop comprises of participants from US government, commercial and private entity, to include research institutions and a lot of other sectors participated in this scenario-based workshop. During this workshop, we look at two core objectives. The first objective is an assessment of law enforcement need for detecting and investigating criminal activities involving a US issued central bank digital currency. Another objective for this workshop was a determination of new type of techniques and policy action that should be considered as part of the CBDC research activity that is currently going on, and how we can use these policy actions or techniques to support the development of a central bank issued digital currency. During this workshop, we carry out what we call a scenario-based approach. First, by looking at the design that currently exists to illustrate specific type of criminal activities that could involve a US issued central bank digital currency. By understanding various design techniques, we may be able to understand what specific type of criminal activities that can be carried out using a US-based issued central bank digital currency. During this workshop, we also looked at the quantitative and the quantitative insights about policy significance as regarding a US issued central bank digital currency. This workshop helped us to look deeper and hear or listen directly to how potential law enforcement entity see the impact or understand the impact of a US central bank issued digital currency. The report of this workshop is currently being developed. And my plan and my hope is that we may be able to share the outcome of the workshop with our partner and be able to understand or provide more insight on the effect on law enforcement, the issue or the use of a central bank digital currency. In conclusion, I want to use this opportunity to thank our Republic of Korea partner as we continue to work and collaborate on this project. This project will help us, all the stakeholders, to better understand, to be able to have more insight on the implications, to include tracking, detecting, basically understanding and attribution, or be able to stop illicit transactions that may involve the use of a central bank digital currency in both countries. Therefore, the work we are doing together will help to shape and reduce cybercrime and be able to position us to be ahead of the potential criminals of fraudulent transactions that may be conducted using central bank digital currency. Again, I thank you for listening, and I hope you are enjoying the Blockchain Meetup Conference 2024.